I used to laugh at him for being too loyal, the kind of man who texted goodnight even when we were fighting, who'd cancel a night out just to cook me dinner. I told him love shouldn't feel like a leash, that I wanted freedom. I remember his face that night, calm but cracked around the edges, like glass about to give way. When I told him I needed space, he didn't beg, didn't argue, just nodded. I thought I'd won something, but now when I see her, the woman who holds his hand, the way I once brushed it away, I realize I wasn't mocking his loyalty. I was mocking the kind of love I was too afraid to deserve. Tell me, when you lose someone who only ever wanted to stay, how do you forgive yourself for pushing them to go? Would you still call it freedom if the silence feels like punishment? The night he stopped waiting wasn't loud. No shouting, no doors slammed, just a kind of stillness that wrapped around the room like fog. He stood there, suitcase at his side, looking at me as if memorizing the last shape of us. I thought he'd come back like always. He always did. But that night, he didn't say a word. He just smiled. That kind of tired, almost grateful smile. And walked out. I kept telling myself it was a test, that he wanted me to chase him. I didn't. Pride felt easier than vulnerability. But later, when the silence grew too loud, I realized he hadn't left to punish me. He'd left to save himself from being loved like an afterthought. Weeks passed before I saw him again. Not in person, but through someone else's laughter. I was at a cafe when I heard it, soft and familiar, the sound of him truly happy. My stomach dropped before I turned my head. He was sitting outside across from her. The way he looked at her, open, relaxed, gentle. It wasn't the man I broke. It was the man he used to be before me. I should have looked away. Instead, I watched them until my coffee went cold. It wasn't jealousy. Not exactly. It was recognition, the painful kind. Seeing the love I once had blooming in someone else's hands. Silence became its own kind of language between us. After the calls stopped, after the messages turned into polite updates, I'd tell myself I didn't care, that I'd chosen this. But at night, I'd scroll through old photos, pausing on the little things. The way he looked at me when I wasn't trying. The way his hand always found mine even when I pretended to pull away. I'd mocked him for being loyal, but now I understand loyalty is just love with patience. And patience is what I ran out of. It's strange, isn't it? How you only miss the quiet parts of love when the world gets too loud. I saw them again months later, at the farmer's market, of all places. He was carrying a basket filled with flowers, her arm looped through his. They looked effortless. I watched him bend down to kiss her temple, and I realized something painful yet freeing. He didn't change who he was to be loved again. He just found someone who didn't ask him to. I used to think love was about excitement, chaos, the kind that burns. But maybe it's about peace, the kind I mistook for boredom. Watching them, I didn't feel anger anymore, just the ache of knowing that the love I once mocked now looked beautiful on someone else. It started with a text I shouldn't have sent. Hey, just wanted to see how you're doing. I stared at it for hours before pressing send. My hands shook when the typing dots appeared. I didn't know what I was hoping for. Forgiveness, maybe. Or proof that he still thought of me. His reply came minutes later, simple and kind. I'm good. Hope you're okay too. No bitterness, no longing, just peace. The kind that doesn't need closure because it's already healed. I felt something collapse inside me. I had spent months rehearsing what I'd say if I ever got the chance, but suddenly, words didn't matter. He didn't owe me a conversation. He'd already moved on. I was the one still trying to make sense of a love I'd thrown away. That night, I dreamed of him. Not the version who left, but the one who used to trace my shoulders in the dark, whispering how he couldn't believe I chose him. In the dream, he reached for me again. But when I tried to touch his face, my fingers met cold air. I woke up crying, the sheets damp with sweat, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. I sat up, gasping, realizing it wasn't him I missed. It was the version of myself I'd been when he loved me. Softer, open, fearless. Love changes us, but loss unmakes us. I didn't plan to see him. It just happened. The universe playing its cruel, perfect trick. We crossed paths at a friend's gathering, surrounded by laughter that didn't touch either of us. He greeted me first, the same voice I'd memorized now, steadier, lighter. She was there too. His new girlfriend standing just close enough for it to be clear. They weren't fragile. I smiled, pretending it didn't hurt. He asked how I'd been and I lied, said, "Good." But when our eyes met, something unspoken passed between us. Not love, not regret, but recognition. We had both survived each other. Later that night, I ended up talking to a stranger at the bar. Someone who didn't know my story. He asked if I'd ever been in love, and I laughed, maybe too sharply. "Yes," I said, and I ruined it. He looked at me, not with pity, but curiosity. "Why?" he asked. And for the first time, I didn't hide. Because I thought love was supposed to make me feel wild, but he made me feel safe. I mistook safety for boredom. Saying it out loud broke something, but it also freed me. Maybe confessions don't always need to be forgiven. Sometimes they just need to be spoken. A week later, I wrote him a letter. I told him everything I never said. How I mocked his loyalty because it scared me. How I wanted to believe I was too free to be tamed. I told him I was sorry. Not because I wanted him back, but because I finally understood what I lost. I didn't mail it. Some things aren't meant to be returned. I folded the letter and tucked it in my journal. It felt like closure. Quiet, private, undeserving of an audience. For the first time, I didn't need his forgiveness. I just needed my own. One morning, I caught my reflection in the bathroom mirror and barely recognized her. The woman staring back at me looked softer, not from youth, but from surrender. For months, I'd worn guilt like perfume, something invisible but always there. That day, I finally wiped it away. I realized I'd spent so long defining myself by who I was to him that I'd forgotten who I was without him. The mirror didn't show regret anymore. It showed a beginning. I didn't need to be forgiven to start over. I just needed to stop asking love to fix what I refused to heal. I went back to the cafe where we'd first met. The tables were different, the music softer, but the air still carried the same sweetness of roasted coffee and new beginnings. I ordered what we used to share, black for him, cappuccino for me, and sat by the window, not to relive the past, but to thank it. Love had built me, broken me, and rebuilt me again. It was strange, the peace that came with remembering without aching. I smiled, realizing that maybe growth isn't about forgetting people. It's about outgrowing the version of yourself that needed them. When he called, it wasn't dramatic. Just his voice, steady and kind, asking if I'd like to meet. I said yes, not from hope, but closure. We met at a park bench where autumn leaves fell in soft spirals around us. He thanked me for my letter, said it gave him peace. I told him I didn't send it, and he smiled, said somehow he knew. There was no apology left to give, no resentment left to hold. Just two people who once loved deeply, now sitting in the quiet understanding that sometimes love ends so something softer can begin. I started taking walks alone. No destination, no playlist, just the sound of my footsteps and the city breathing around me. I began to love my own company again. It wasn't loneliness anymore. It was clarity. I learned to cook for one, to laugh without an audience, to sleep without reaching for the empty space beside me. Every small thing felt like reclaiming a part of myself I'd left behind. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for love to return. I was preparing for it, if it ever did, to find me whole. That night, I wrote another letter, this time to myself. I wrote about the mistakes I made, the love I lost, the lessons that hurt the most. But I also wrote about the woman I was becoming, patient, brave, and open. I folded the letter and tucked it into my journal beside the first one. There was no need to send this one either. It wasn't meant for anyone else to read. It was my way of saying, I forgive you, I'm proud of you. You survived. I met him at an art gallery. One of those evenings filled with quiet music and too much wine. He stood in front of a painting I didn't understand, saying, it looked like forgiveness in color. I laughed, and he turned, smiling in that curious way that makes you want to keep talking. He didn't ask about my past. He asked about what I dreamed of now. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a broken story. I felt like a blank page. But that scared me too. I promised myself I'd never fall again without knowing where I'd land. Still, something in his voice made me wonder if this time, falling wouldn't hurt. We met again a week later for coffee. It felt natural, easy. No games, no pretending. He asked questions that made me think, not perform, about music, art, and the kind of love that doesn't suffocate. I told him I'd been in something complicated once, something that taught me how to stay, even when leaving felt easier. He didn't flinch or pry, he just nodded and said, then you know what real love costs. That line stayed with me long after we said goodbye. Maybe it wasn't temptation. Maybe it was timing finally being kind. The closer he got, the louder my fear became. It whispered that I'd ruin this too. That I'd demand too much, love too fast, or worse, push him away before he could leave. I almost canceled our next meeting, telling myself I needed more time to heal. But maybe healing isn't hiding. Maybe it's learning how to love again without the armor. I stood in front of my closet, heart racing, realizing I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of being seen again. Completely, honestly, with all my cracks showing. He invited me to dinner at a quiet rooftop restaurant. Candles, jazz, the kind of view that makes you forget to breathe. We talked for hours. No pretense, no pretending to be more or less than we were. At one point, he reached for my hand, and instead of pulling away, I let him. The city lights blurred behind him, and for a brief moment, I felt the world stop. It wasn't about starting over or replacing anyone. It was about opening a door I'd kept locked. Maybe love isn't supposed to erase the past. Maybe it's meant to teach you how to stop living there. That night when I got home, I sat on my bed and cried, not from sadness, but from the weight of possibility. I'd spent so long fearing love would break me again, that I forgot how beautiful it was to risk it. But beneath the hope was a shadow, the memory of what I'd done before. What if I failed again? What if I hurt someone who didn't deserve it? Then I remembered his words, real love costs. Maybe that's what makes it worth it. The point isn't to love without fear. It's to love anyway. It happened by accident. A photo that appeared on my feed. A moment I had no right to see. He and her, smiling in front of their new home, keys in hand. The caption simple, new beginnings. My breath caught, fingers trembling as I scrolled past, but it was too late. The image burned into me, reminding me how far he'd gone without me. For months, I'd told myself I'd moved on, but in that instant, my heart betrayed me. Not because I wanted him back, but because I wanted to believe I'd been unforgettable. I hated that I still cared. Healing isn't a straight line. It loops, it breaks, it tests you when you least expect it. I almost called him. My thumb hovered over his name, my chest aching with words I had no right to say. Do you ever miss me? Do you ever think about us? But I didn't. I couldn't, because I knew he was happy, and happiness, real happiness, doesn't come with ghosts. I set the phone down and sat in silence, letting the ache settle instead of running from it. Maybe that's what healing really is. Learning to sit with the parts of you that still remember, without letting them speak for you. When I saw him again, the new man, I told him the truth. I said I'd seen my ex, that it stirred something I thought was gone. He didn't look disappointed. He just nodded and said, "It means you cared deeply." That's not something to be ashamed of. No one had ever met my vulnerability with that kind of grace. I expected jealousy, distance. Instead, I found understanding. He didn't ask me to move faster than I was ready for. He just said, "I'll be here when you're done looking backward." And for the first time, I believed someone might actually mean it. Later that night, I walked past the street where he and I once lived. The windows were lit, laughter echoing faintly through the open air. A sound that no longer belonged to me. I stopped for a moment, letting the memories flood in. The arguments, the tenderness, the quiet nights we didn't appreciate until they were gone. Then I turned away. The past will always whisper, but it no longer commands. It felt like standing at the edge of an ocean, the tide pulling, the heart steadying. I wasn't drowning this time. I was watching the waves and choosing not to go in. That night I couldn't sleep. Not from pain, but from peace. The strange, unsettling kind that comes after tears. I realized love doesn't vanish. It just changes form. What we shared still lived in me, but no longer as a wound, more like a scar that reminded me how deeply I could feel. I whispered goodnight into the darkness, not to him, but to everything I'd carried for too long. Maybe the point isn't to stop missing someone. Maybe it's learning to let the missing coexist with moving on. The morning light touched my face differently that day. Softer, kinder. Like it was reminding me I'd survived something I thought would destroy me. I made coffee, opened the windows, and let the world in. No ghosts, no guilt, just air, sunlight, and the quiet hum of possibility. Healing doesn't announce itself. It arrives quietly, through small rituals that once felt unbearable. I realized I hadn't thought about him in days, not because I forced it, but because my heart had finally made space for something new. Peace doesn't always come with closure. Sometimes it just slips in when you stop chasing it. He met me by the river, the man who waited, not for me to forget, but to remember who I was. We walked side by side, saying little, the sound of water filling the spaces between our thoughts. At one point, he took my hand. It wasn't electric or cinematic. It was steady, grounding. I looked at him and realized love doesn't have to rescue you to be real. Sometimes it just walks beside you, unafraid of your history. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being happy again. I felt deserving. When he kissed me, I almost pulled away, out of habit, out of fear. But then I realized I didn't need to protect myself anymore. His lips were gentle, not demanding, his touch light enough to let me choose. And I did. The world blurred around us, city noise fading, time pausing just long enough for me to feel safe inside the moment. I had spent so long associating love with losing myself that I'd forgotten it could also mean finding peace. It wasn't about replacing the past. It was about rewriting what love could be. We didn't talk about the future that night. We didn't make promises or label what this was. Instead, we shared silence, the comfortable kind that doesn't need to fill itself. He looked at me the way I once wished to be looked at, not as someone to fix, but as someone already whole. For years, I thought loyalty meant never leaving. But maybe it means staying when it's easier not to. Even with yourself. Maybe love isn't a cage or a test. Maybe it's a mirror showing you who you've become brave enough to be. There was no dramatic ending, no grand confession, just a choice to stay open, even when it scared me. To love again, not perfectly, but fully. I learned that being loyal doesn't mean losing yourself. It means honoring what's real, even when it changes. I used to mock that kind of devotion. Now I understand it. The love I ridiculed in him, I was finally learning to give. And in that, I found something I didn't expect: freedom. The kind that doesn't come from walking away, but from having the courage to stay. If you told me years ago that I'd be grateful for the heartbreak, I would have laughed in your face. But now, standing here, I see it clearly. Pain wasn't the ending. It was the beginning of who I was meant to become. I mocked him for being loyal because I was scared of what loyalty revealed in me. The parts that needed control, validation, escape. He loved me anyway, even when I didn't deserve it. And maybe that's the cruelest kindness, being loved by someone who shows you what real love costs. I lost him, but in losing him, I found the truth I'd been running from: that love doesn't always stay, but it always leaves you changed. I saw him one last time, months later, at a mutual friends gathering. He looked the same, calm, content, whole. She was there too, her hand in his, laughter effortless. I didn't feel jealousy this time, just something softer. Gratitude, because he taught me everything I needed to learn about love, not through staying, but through leaving. We exchanged a polite hello, nothing more. But when he smiled at me before walking away, I swear it said everything we never could. We turned pain into something beautiful. I used to think confession was about seeking forgiveness. But now I know it's about facing yourself. The raw, unfiltered version you hide behind other people's love. I forgave him long before I forgave myself. But now, when I look in the mirror, I see a woman who learned the hardest way that loyalty isn't weakness, is strength. That freedom isn't found in leaving, but in staying honest, even when it hurts. I once mocked love for being too safe. Now I crave that safety like sunlight. Maybe that's the real confession. I finally understand the kind of love I used to take for granted. I took out the 2 letters, the one I wrote to him and the one I wrote to myself, and read them one last time. The words didn't sting anymore. They felt like artifacts from another life, proof of how far I'd come. I tore them gently, piece by piece, and let the fragments fall into the wind from my balcony. They fluttered like tiny white birds. My past, my regrets, my old versions, finally free. For years, I believed love was something someone else gave you. Now I know it's something you learn to give yourself first. If this were a movie, maybe it would end with someone new walking into the frame, a hand reaching for mine, a promise of forever. But this isn't a movie. This is real. And real love doesn't always come wrapped in another person. Sometimes it's just you, sitting in silence, knowing you made it through the fire and came out softer, not bitter. He has his happiness, and I have mine. Different, quieter, but no less true. So here's my confession. I mocked my husband for being too loyal, but now I finally understand. He didn't lose me, I lost him. And maybe that was the lesson all along, to never mistake gentle love for weakness.